So almost on time, I would propose we just start. Okay, for each of us?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
perfect.
So welcome to you and anybody to the Stream Around the Clock conference, We Need a Change, organized by FORMWELT in cooperation with Leanbase, the largest platform for lean and agile organization in Germany. I'm very glad, together with Rebekka, to facilitate and moderate this event. And maybe before we start, some words about us. Rebekka, would you like to start?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Martin. And hello, everyone. I am Rebekka Manos, your co-facilitator for today's session. And I am a professional coach and facilitator for leadership development, organizational transformation, and mindfulness. And since I am deeply impressed by the work that Gitta is doing through the FORMWELT and also quite impressed by her commitment and determination to bring about change, it's an absolute honor for me to be here today and to join you all for this conversation and this dialogue. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you, Gitta, for the invitation.
Wow. I don't have to say that much. Okay, I will try. About me, my company, Participation Rocks, and as a working out loud coach, I'm supporting organizations to develop participatory learning and working settings. And I organize and conduct bar camps and interactive events, and love to moderate events like this here as well. So thanks a lot for inviting me to this.
Thank you, the two of you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just some very few words about the four currents of the conference. This conference aims to bring these four currents of our time: systemic society perspective, climate and sustainability, transhumanism and neo-leadership and economy, together to enable dialogue, exchange and joint actions for a better future. So maybe we keep that in mind in our dialogue and discussions. Yes, and starting with some words about FORMWELT, who organized this event, who brought up all the speakers and the topics we are going to deal with today. And the aim of FORMWELT is to promote specialized, renewing, innovative research projects and applications within and from the fields of humanities, systems theory, and scientific or mathematical theory of complex systems. And the main focus and central motive to the work of the FORMWELT is the development and construction of bridges in space and time, in communication and mind, to carry both science and humanities into the future, to evaluate achievements effectively, to critically analyze what needs to be provided and shape the world in an active cooperation. And you are very invited, if you have not yet done so, to visit the FORMWELT website on the internet. The URL you can see at the bottom. Okay, so let's just have a short look at the agenda of these 3 hours. Some things have already been done. We had tried. We introduced FORMWELT and this event. We will say some word to the topic. Then we will, of course, introduce our guests speaking, keynotes and statements. Afterwards, we will start with the keynote, and afterwards we will have the guest statements in alphabetical order by last name. And then we will give all of us a short break of approximately 15 minutes to get something to drink, to do some steps or whatever. And then we will start with the open dialogue between our guests, of course, but also together with the audience in our YouTube channel. We will collect questions from there, as David already did. Thanks again. And we'll try to lead them into this discourse here as well. So if everything's fine for all of you, let's just start. The topic of this dialogue: accelerating a new kind of thinking and science for a sustainable future, is something to me that's very, very necessary, because with old kind of thinking and science, we will reach old things. We will not reach new things. So we have to accelerate a new kind of all of this. And when I see who are here a speaker, we will, I think, get very, very close to this. And I would like to introduce now the speaker of the keynote, Sebastián Gaggero Dávila. I'm very glad to meet you here. First time I saw you, and maybe some words about Sebastián. He's a sociologist with studies and practices in social action research in the field of human communities and the generation of well-being. The main focus of his work and experience as a researcher has been to discover the relational dynamics that generate value and well-being in communities and organizations. Among his main interests are philosophical reflection, social entrepreneurship, and the art of pilgrimage as a spiritual technology. He has published articles and is now in the process of editing a book for 2021. Rebekka, I think you would like to say some words about Gitta.
Yes, then I have the pleasure to introduce Gitta Peyn to you, whom you all might know very well, but maybe not all the details in the background. So Gitta is a German systems and cybernetics researcher, co-developer of the linguistic system FORMWELT and the polyvalent logic of cognition Weltform. She is also an international FORMWELT speaker, co-founder of the FORMWELT-Institute, and recently became panel member of the ongoing US World Academy of Art and Science Conference, Strategies for Transformative Leadership. She also loves stracciatella ice cream, and she lives in Lüchow, Germany.
Thank you. Very important point with the stracciatella. Today is not your stracciatella day, right, Gitta?
No, it is not.
Oh, sorry. What a pity.
It's tea, and I'm fasting.
Okay, so I'm happy to introduce Julene Siddique to you. Julene holds an MA from SOAS, University of London, where she studied medical anthropology, anthropology of development, and anthropology of music. Further to this, she worked with the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research to develop a socio-systemic framework marrying social sciences with system sciences. Julene invented the tonal spatial music system and the rhythmic temporal music system, and created the groundbreaking musical nutrition framework for how the benefits of music operate for different people contexts and conditions, and founded the Nada Brahma platform. She's passionate about engaging musics and arts in psychosomatic and biosocial frameworks for health, consciousness, and systemic social impact. I'm very happy to have you here, Julene, and I'm very looking forward to your input.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great.
Great. The next one I have on the list is David Wood. And before I share a few words about David, it might be a good moment to stop the screen sharing so everyone gets a little bit of a bigger picture of David and can see him in full view. So David comes from a pioneering career in the smartphone industry, and today he is the chair of the London Futurists, a meetup dedicated to the discussion of the likely impact of technology on human experience. He is also director at the Transhumanist UK Party, campaigning to changing the political landscape to including the insights of transhumanism. He has written 6 books and editored several more, and he lives in London, UK. David says about himself that he has been carrying a smartphone in his shirt pocket since 1999, which is for 21 years, and not the same smartphone, of course. But that left us wondering, David, is that the same shirt?
I have changed it a few times over the years. My wife occasionally suggests that it's time.
We are happy to hear that. Thank you.
Great. How about Stephen? Still not yet here, I suppose.
No, so I would propose, in case we can still get hold of him, then we will make the introduction then, and we now proceed.
Okay, so I would like to introduce Barbara Zuber to you. She's a co-founder and CEO of the School of Facilitating, and Barbara works as a facilitator for all kinds of change topics for management boards, teams, and individuals. As a senior, she concentrates on passing her knowledge and experience on to business leaders, change professionals, and colleagues in training program called Facilitating Change, Dealing with Complexity and Dynamics, using Theory U as the underlying guiding principle. Together with her founding members, she is the co-author of the book, Facilitating Change More Than Change Management. The school's vision, sustainable future organizations where people can live up to their potential. Sounds great. Looking forward to hear more from you. So now it's time to start with a keynote. Sebastián, whenever you want to share your screen, you may do this.
Thank you. To be honest, I have no presentation prepared because, and thank you for the introduction and the invitation, because I feel that in this kind of conversations, the most important maybe is to connect to each other, to look each other to the eye, and to properly connect to our humanness in this sort of matters, because it is such, what we see today is a human crisis that we are experiencing. And if we do not connect to our humanity, our emotions, and the place from which we see our world, we won't make it. So if it is okay, as I said, thank you all very much for the invitation. Thank you for putting your time and your energy to be here, and for making clear that there is nothing more important in this present than being in this conversation. And about this, when I see the topic that we're discussing today, a new kind of thinking and a science for a sustainable future, the first thing that appears in my mind is, yes, we need a sustainable future, actually, hopefully a livable future, because in the conditions that we are now, in 100 years, the capacity to live in this planet is largely at risk. And to reflect a little bit of what do we mean by a new kind of thinking and a new kind of science. And I feel tempted, in order to begin this conversation, to repeat a little story that I heard a few years ago. And it goes that one day a great disciple was going to God, demanding to be taught a truth. And this poor God said, "My friend, it is such a hot day. Please get me a glass of water and we can discover all the truth together." So the disciple, when he heard that, he went to the village and he started knocking in all the doors. And in one of the, to ask for the glass of water. And in one of these doors, it appears a beautiful young lady, and the disciple falls in love. He stays there, he marries, they got children, they started making a life together. And one day, after a few years, rain becomes to fall to the ground. And it keeps raining and raining and raining. The torrents are swollen. At a certain moment, all the houses start getting full with rain. In a certain moment, his kids were taken away by the current. And in that moment of desperation, the disciple calls out to the sky and say, "Lord, please save me." And the Lord, the God, replies, "Where is that glass of water that I asked for?" So what I wanted to bring with this with this story is, how is it that we live by time, we human beings? What is the time that we human beings operate in? And what are the times in which nature operates? When we talk about a sustainable future or a livable future, we are thinking in something that is to come there, something that is away. But in one way or the other, the future and the past do not exist because they are only manners for us to be here in the present. We have nothing but the present that we're living. So if we're talking about a sustainable future or a livable future, the invitation there to put a reflection is on how we are living this present in order to give rise to that future. Many times we wait for things to change there, for things to be different. We think about the future, but we do not do the transformation in this present. We can see it, for example, by the Club of Rome that was born in the 60s, that was already calling out and saying that we are making a destruction to our planet, but always with the concern in the future, but not taking care of our present as a society as a whole. And I wanted to put that element of the present to invite that as a space of reflection on how we are experiencing it. And on the other hand, also to reflect about the new kind of thinking and science. Because nowadays, and this is my personal opinion, we have been drawn to worshiping science, to worshiping innovation, to worshiping entrepreneurship. But in certain moment, the purpose of it sometimes maybe gets lost in the beginning on how we do it. How is that innovation or that science supporting an ethical transformation of our living today? How much of the science that we are generating is appearing by thinking about what we thought that was interesting to be developed as a framework? Or how much of what we think and we reflect upon actually generates a behavioral transformation in our living together? How much is it lost in the innovations that we do? Because innovation should support an improvement of our daily living, should be at service of resolving the problems that are unacceptable for us today. But how much of the innovation that we are innovating is just a race in order to generate different businesses or to have the cooler technology or to bring us to Mars? In a situation in which it sounds like we are throwing the towel on this planet and looking for another one to destroy it. We are looking at science in order for us to live up to 150 years, but we are experiencing an overpopulation by which we are destroying the planet. So where is the ethical reflection taken serious in that situation? How much of the science that we are doing is at service of resolving the fear of death that we have as individuals in the species, but not thinking in the broader picture of our responsibility as a species in this planet? And I wanted to bring a little bit of these topics because I was really moved by the fact that Nora Bason will be joining in the next conversations. And I wanted to bring back two main teachings that I got by reading Gregory Bateson. And one of them is when you talk to scientists, to bring a little religion. That's why I wanted to bring that story about God. And also for us to position ourselves as individuals in order to take seriously what Gregory said about humanity, that the biggest problem that we're facing is that we are experiencing epistemological tragedies. Epistemological tragedies in the sense of we are not aware from where we are looking at the world. What are the criteria that we are holding in the decision making that we do? last December, I had the opportunity to participate at COP25. So I was there present in all the rumble, in one hand, listening to the scientists and the activists and the people that is actually putting their life at service, almost like Joan of Arc, in order for us to have a livable future. And on the other hand, the decision makers, the businessmen that were not even capable of separating the recycling in the proper manner. And we are hoping for them to make the decisions when we see there that our nations, our countries, they send them. They spend a whole bunch of money for them to make decisions for people who are living with $1 a day, $2 a day, but from that position of privilege, they are not being able to do what is right. Because the awareness about climate change and what we are doing is like way back past. Like we don't have to talk about that anymore. Like we have all the science clear around that. There is no more debate. It's a matter of a position of really reflecting what do we want to conserve in our daily living. It seems like we as humanity are not in a position of desire to improve Gaia's regenerative capacities. It seems that the only thing that we're doing is to try to conserve at all cost the way of living that we have. We are humanity, as humanity, we are afraid of let go of the comfort of taking airplanes every week. We are afraid of letting go of the comfort of changing our wardrobe every season. We are not comfortable of letting go of the fact that we can carry a water bottle, but instead we are buying bottles every day, and it's not that hard. We are not capable of letting go of the comfort of going by walk to the grocery store. That yes, it might be 15 minutes, but we can take a cart or something that could help us. We can buy locally. So where is our capacity to let go, to detach from our comfortness in order to think about a broader picture? And it's difficult. I'm not saying that I'm making this statement as someone who has been enlightened, as the Dalai Lama, that I'm living in a 100% sustainable manner. It's tough, but we are afraid to acknowledge how tough it is for ourselves, because we are detached from that space of self-reflection in order to see our own responsibility around that. Because we don't want to feel bad about ourselves, because it's hard to have those tough conversations in the mirror with ourselves. And that's why when reflecting and a little bit to finalize this first movement, as Nietzsche would have said, when we talk about a new manner of thinking, I believe that thinking, it's not only putting things in logic, like 1 + 1 = 2. I would like to invite there to rather a space of reflection in which we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to be moved emotionally and to face that. Because we do not change our ways because we are afraid of what we see. We are afraid to be vulnerable, to admit, oh, maybe I have been wrong for the last 35 years while doing this. Acknowledging our mistakes and to embrace them, to accept them. To accept and embrace the whole history that we have had, and to recognize that now, in this present, we all as humanity can allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to say, we have made a mistake and it's okay. It is okay. We have made a mistake, but we have all the information available to know what we can do. It's all out there. It is in YouTube. You can learn how to compost, how to do everything. It is in Google. You can find all the information there. what is missing is in our hearts, in our minds, and first in the regeneration of our soul. Because this human crisis that we see in the symptoms of the climate emergency, we see it in the coronavirus, we see it in the crisis of discrimination all over the world, we see it in different fields of our living together. And the first movement that we need to do is to regenerate our spirit in order to have a regenerative cultural living in which we do not discriminate each other no more. We do not punish our mistakes. We allow others to appear from their legitimacy. And in that manner of living, maybe we can start seeing nature not only as a place to extract resources, but maybe as the one that holds our living in this beautiful ship that we are sharing with many other species in this vast universe that we live. So thank you for listening to that. And I would love to hear how you resonate around it. Thank you, Gitta.
Thank you so much, Sebastián, for sharing your keynote with us. Very inspirational, many, thoughts that we really can now discuss and ponder on. So the procedure for now is to give every one of the other guests a bit of room to share their thoughts on your keynote. So we will start we set alphabetical order, if you feel comfortable with that, to give each of you a room of approximately up to 5 minutes, and Martin and I will take care that it all goes in order and everyone gets their space. So the first person I would like to invite to speak is Gitta, if you feel you would like to start and give your thoughts.
Yes, I would like to start. And can I share my presentation I prepared? The topic I am relating to is what you said, Sebastián, the purpose of innovation. You said innovation should support daily living, and I totally agree. So if you're okay, I would like to share some presentation I made. Rebekka, Martin, is it possible? Yeah, okay, let's see where we are here. Can you see them? Yeah, Sebastián, you addressed the general problems we are dealing right now with, and I took the liberty to put them together on one chart so we can see them. They are actually wicked problems, in my opinion. There, I think I agree, Sebastián, you will agree, is poverty. And not only poverty of money, but poverty of heart, of empathy, of wisdom, and of knowledge how to deal with the current crisis and complexity of this world. You do not have to read all of this. It's just to put it there and people can read it later. I use it to put my ideas here to you. Let me see. Our proposal to help with the addressed problems is our research. It's FORMWELT. FORMWELT is something we created by thinking about where we are going and what the possibilities are we have now, watching at the general problems. And there we thought that it's digitization, right? Not digitalization as in, in German, it's digitalization. So I always get it mixed up. What we think, my husband and I, who did a research on language and on logic of cognition, is that digitization is not the correct term to address the current problems. because for the first time in the history of mankind, we are emulating reality, not only among humans, but together with machines. And one of the most the deepest problems we have is vagueness of natural language and need to raise complexity in language to answer increasing complexity in world, a need for conscious redesign of cognitive functions and processes, and a need for conscious, precise, and complex communication. So, one moment. Rising complexity in language as an answer to increasing complexity in word is something we think that really is needed, that we need people capable of systemic thinking. We need people capable of mastering complexity by thinking and communicating, not only differentiated, but dimensionalized too. It cannot be done with vague natural language or knowledge of logic, constructivism, etc. alone. We need more. And here are some concepts that not many people are thinking about. It's still something elite, which has to be brought, in my opinion, to a broader public. That we have to talk about complexity we have to talk about contingency and complexity management. I put the references how I understand complexity and contingency here on this file as complexity selective relationing of the elements and contingency, neither necessity or impossibility. Both of them means that we always have to deal with the undetermined, and that puts us under a lot of stress and is not helping people when they do not know how to address the current problems. Because when they do not know how to address them, they do not know how to deal with this complexity and contingency, how to differentiate things and how to put things in a more broader perspectives and to think more dimensionalized. You, Sebastián, addressed mostly the problems of the heart, what I really, really loved, and I think it's a very important topic. I would like to add something that how people can deal with ideological impulses and complexity deeply depends on how they can differentiate and dimensionate their world. For example, when we look at worldview and ideology, many are just react in a one-dimensional polarized way, and I think we have to address this as a general problem in the public all over the planet, because people who are now confronted with this immense complexity in reality emulation, in the internet, in social media, etc., they are conflicted and confronted with toxic atmospheres and structures that does not help them, but leads to only react with one dimension where they can do more, put on another perspective on things or not, or another more, so they can learn how to address the problems they have in a more dimensioned way and think more about other people having other world views, other people coming from their own reality emulation, and how to interact in a more differentiated way, and thus a more empathic way and empathic way. Let me, go further here. Our research has led to a semantically and formally self-sufficient linguistic system, which is a coding language for language and meaning, which can be spoken by humans and artificial intelligence. This language will be put up on a platform, so everybody can work with and create his or her own meaning, make this accessible in depth to other people. So there is a better chance for a global better understanding. These 3 sentences here just explain how it's meant, People can watch the video later. It's not necessary to read everything now. I just put it on the wall and good is. But the concepts we are already integrated in this language, in this linguistic system, are concepts of mathematics and logic, constructivism, systems theory, model theory, theory of science, and other fundamental concepts which are in their deep structure available to children by nature, and then they got lost at the moment the children start to socialize, and when they go to school, their natural abilities to think logical and to think systemically are gone, which leads to a deep crisis in dealing with the complex problems of our time.
Gitta,
Yeah.
may I ask you to come to a close?
Yes, I thought we had 5 to 10 minutes and not only 10. I'm sorry, I prepared for 10. Huh?
Okay, then
Okay.
you go, but then we will stop you hard at 10.
Thank you. Okay. Here you see a list of the application range of what we have done here to support humanity in a better understanding of the individual itself, and a better understanding in communication. For example, we can help in longevity research, transformative science, AI and robotics, thinking and intelligence, and the aspect more important, I think, to what Sebastián addressed, self-emancipation. It's a dry word here, but this also means to get a deeper contact to your feelings, to help you to address your feelings better. People who cannot say what they mean have problems to mean what they say, and the other way around. I think that's comprehensible. And there's one thing that is really dear to my heart here, is to transform science by creating a platform with this linguistic system that combines that helps with transformative science by at one point transdisciplinary thinking, but even more, and that's very important, to integrate citizen scientists into the global problem solution processes, that integrates people all over the planet into science, that delivers a universal language for science, where people can come together and solve problems, where people can explore their natural super intelligence. So it helps with project-specific language that can be developed clearly and effectively, with descriptions of scientific views can be reviewed based on FORMWELT. New theories can develop, inner, inter, and transdisciplinary work will become more effective. And FORMWELT references are competence indicators, which is also important because many working and living in social media have the problem that they do not know any longer whom they can trust. That goes to politicians, but also to scientists. Yeah, they get their information on YouTube. So how will they know what is bullshit and what is something they really can work with? That is a problem today, and we should help people with it. Working with citizen scientists will become easier, and topics can become scientifically more compatible, and contents do not have to contradict each other any longer. Science teams can develop problem formulations and generate problem solutions. FORMWELT is translatable point by point from one language to another without any loss of meaning on reference level. I find that really important in intercultural communication, but also when it comes to translating FORMWELT into children's language or into the language of people who cannot read or write properly, or when it comes to therapy, when we want to know what's actually going on in someone's mind. So I think I'm almost finished here. Here are some points for you, Sebastián. Rising clarity of thought and expression I find important, and that is something our research will will make happen, actually. Self-observation and self-criticism, the ability to self-criticize yourself is something fundamental to explore your own individuality. Yeah, it supports your resilience. It should not be something that's deeply wrong, which it is right now. People who are criticized feel that they are not okay, and I find that's really irritating. Rising awareness of your decision-making processes should be something, and for your own meaning and for your sense of life and so on. So in the end, we hope that we deliver here something that really will help with rising authenticity and integrity. So our idea is jazz is freedom. When you think about that, that's what Thelonious Monk said. So let's jazz. And that was it. Thank you, Rebekka, for your patience.
Oh no, thank you, Gitta, for sharing. And I can only tell you that while observing the YouTube channel, I'm already reading some comments of people agreeing strongly with what you are saying. So we will take a look at that later.
Thank you.
Martin and I have just checked the timing in the background, so it's totally fine if you are needing up to 10 minutes to make your statements. That's absolutely okay. So I would like to invite Julene to speak as the next one. Please feel free to share some slides if you want to, or just speak. And,
I was just, I didn't prepare a slide. I just, like I said, I agree with Sebastián. We need to look at each other. So yes, I have done a lot of work in the merging of social sciences and system sciences, as well as the arts. Very much looking at the work that Steve Wills is doing, and how can we evolve the social sciences to solve real world problems? And I say evolve, evolution of knowledge, not failure of the discipline, because knowledge is always evolving. And I think because a lot of the problems we have, there's social problems, there are behavioral problems of how we interface with each other and with our planet. And I think I first want to start with the contributions of the social sciences and the contextualized disciplines is the understanding of larger order systems, the relationality, understanding there is no isolation of social phenomenon, all people, institution, things, how the relational dynamics, and understanding culture as forms of knowledge and ways of knowing that are connected to space, place, and language. This is very important because I'm going to bring up the knowledge issue later on when I link to FORMWELT. But I think what I want to make clear is that we institutionalize what we understand, okay? And that understanding that social institutions have ranged diversely throughout the history of humanity. In matriarchal societies, there was a lot of rotational leadership. So one woman would be the leader during one season, another woman would be a leader during another season, and they're very easily interchanged. It wasn't as if I have to stay leader, I have to stay president, I have to keep this campaign, I have to keep growing. That wasn't a mentality. Understanding that also rituals were social spaces. It's a social consensus about what happens in a certain place. NGOs, companies, institutions, we institutionalize what we understand. So why are social sciences, quote unquote, failing to solve problems, or why are we failing to solve problems? Well, I think in terms of the social sciences, they've gone through an evolution, right? There's been a protectionist idea how to protect heritage, but that's been sort of evolved understanding. Well, what we're dealing with is diverse forms of knowledge, some that are valued over than others. We're dealing with incentives of institutions, which I'll get to later. And I think the other reason why social sciences have not been able to solve, so much world problems is that there's a very quantitative emphasis in society, emphasis on quantification, on science. Social sciences, the arts have gotten sort of less room to move. And the third thing is, I think that due to diverse social and cultural institutions, the social sciences have analyzed things ideologically in localized ways rather than structurally and systemically. And in that sense, maybe not completely equipped to deal with the systemic complexity of what we're dealing with. So my sociosystemic framework, oops, sorry, I just dropped it. My sociosystemic framework is marrying the social sciences and system sciences, working for a transdisciplinary science of society, so that we can reveal the fundamental constructs, forces, processes, mechanisms, and characteristics that underlie all social phenomenon. So understanding larger order social processes systemically, and how when thinking it systemically, that can take us into causality. Because essentially what we want to get to when we solve a problem, we want to know what is the cause of this problem. And this can be viewed in macro, meso, micro, but I want to go into now the systemics of it. What are we dealing with if we really look this crisis in the eyes? And I can quote some different authors from multiple disciplines that are arriving at similar conclusions, which is essentially institutions. In medical anthropology, the biggest hurdle to global health is structural violence. Structural violence is embedded in our society, in this political economic organization of our world. These are conditions which conspire to restrain agency and decide who is at risk. The social detriments of health, which are recognized by the World Health Organization, it is about how the risk of ill health is structured. Violent institutions, essentially, in different studies of development, also Magoo and Robinson did an incredible study reviewing all the theories of world poverty and coming to the conclusion that poverty is structurally created. Who makes the decisions? Countries make decisions against other countries that prevent them from embarking on a path of economic growth. They are structurally built into an anatomy of dependence. So when we're talking about violent institutions or violent structures, we're talking about the destruction of mutuality. So a violent institution says you are on the receiving end. You have no choice in what happens to you. You are on the receiving end of a decision that I make. So addressing things systemically, for example, with violence and crime, the preconditions for that, the preconditions of poverty, I was talking to a professor at Harvard. He's a very intelligent man. He said, if you want to end violence, end socioeconomic inequality. They're not doing it for no reason. So to address these structural factors that are the larger order systems which create symptoms of lack of access, symptoms of lack of participation, symptoms of disadvantage. If we understand them structurally and systemically, then we can understand what's involved in systemic action. And certainly I was involved with wonderful people in applied anthropology, which is some great methods, but that can only take us so far. Structural means of acting, why I put together the social and systemic sciences. One is system leverage points, which Meadows talks about, where to intervene in a system. If you understand where to intervene in a system, you can understand where and how to act systemically. Another method is systemic innovation. So key game-changing innovations that fundamentally alter the structure of that industry, or that build a strategic alternative. Systems change processes. I work a lot in systems change. My thing that I work on is called the Transformative Ecosystem, which involves re-architecting and conscious redesigning, addressing dysfunction and regenerating the dysfunctive parts. This is a big topic, so I'm just summarizing very generally. And also creating a self-illuminating system of inter-awareness, because I'm going to get into knowledge in a second, but fragmented knowledge disempowers, and violent relations are anti-dialogue. You do what I say. There's no dialogue. And it's compartmentalized knowledge that it's not able to see the full picture. What a transformative ecosystem does, it's a self-illuminating system of inter-awareness. It re-architects the structure. It addresses dysfunction and regenerates. So one of the things I want to bring up is how do we, this is basically working towards all the systemic work, not just here to create disrupt. You have to disrupt in order to change, but to build the new. But the wider aspiration, the bigger, higher aspiration is the aligning of social and natural systems. I'm writing a paper actually right now on our current biosocial conflict. We see the psychology of the economic system showing its face in health. Harvard has a brilliant biosocial case-based framework where they look at the social determinants of health. Biopsychosocial model is the core model at the epidemiology of public health today. So it looks at the interface of the human being with their environment. For example, adverse childhood experiences, right? When someone goes through those, you cannot expect that blip in their cognitive development not to manifest in certain behaviors. Therefore, act systemically to alter the preconditions which create the environments, the environments that harvest those types of social conditions. And I think the key, when working sociosystemically, identifying key causal relationships. One causal relationship, which I'm actually writing with Peter Joseph about, is about the causal relationship between institutions and human behavior, which is very, very, I'm just going to read something. The systemic intersection of historical cultural influence paired with short and long-term incentives of the economy, one find themselves along an evolutionarily determined biological propensities, gives us critical information on how the causality is ordered. This kind of epidemiological understanding of the human condition approaches without this kind of understanding, approaches to social progress will have limited efficiency. So understanding how ACEs shape people, educational institutions shape mindsets, the incentives of the economy are shaping behavior, institutions which we belong to, how those affect our lives, how this affects our lives. This is really important systemic thinking, that if you understand this, you can understand how to take different forms of systemic action. And the last but important part that I want to bring up is culture, because working sociosystemically in my field that I'm exploring, it's the systemic half, and there's a lot of system sciences creating nice new structures, structural changes, but if people don't understand how to use those new structures, if they're stuck in a certain behavior, then it's not going to move. You have to work with both mindsets and mechanisms and how that process works together. So I'm just going to talk about culture and the key point of knowledge transformations, because this is what ties me into FORMWELT. Understanding how oppression works and understanding behaviors which threaten sustainability. First one I spoke about, anti-dialogue. You do what I say. There's no dialogue. Dialogic cultural action is liberatory, anti-dialogic, and you can map how dialogic is this organization, how dialogic is this community, how anti-dialogic are they. The banking model. Banking model is information deposited. And this is what we get, information deposited, where even in older models of the educational system that we just repeat, rather than generative knowledge, knowledge that you generate through your experience, through your own thinking. You own that learning experience and therefore are empowered by it. Third knowledge issue, fragmented knowledge as a means of disempowerment. Right, so this is really critical, especially in information, making critical connections, developing yourself, the ability to make critical connections, but also having information platforms such as FORMWELT that help synthesize knowledge by that nature of that empowers. Especially when dealing with complexity, it can be very overwhelming if you can't pull the parts together. People really switch off. And then the last
to close.
Yeah, sure. The last point on that is multiple intelligence and multiple ways of knowing, not a dominant narrative that tells us to that emphasizes one way of thinking, but having multiple intelligence, sensory intelligence, emotional intelligence, intuitive intelligence, multiple forms of intelligence valued. So just to sum up, if we working with these to solve world problems, we need to go into things causally, and we need to make these critical systemic links, right, that can allow us to really re-architect and shape our world, both through changing our structures and our systems, but also through changing ourselves from the inside out. And I'm really happy to be connected to FORMWELT, who are doing this type of emancipation. So thank you for having me.
Great, thank you so much, Julene. And just let me mention that there are already some questions in the YouTube channel also to you from some of our other panel guests as well.
Okay,
so
great.
Are active and watching and listening. And let me say as well that we are trying to at least keep you all a little bit in the time frame, because we want this also to be a dialogue between all of you, and that's why we are trying to keep your statements a little bit shorter. And you will excuse us, Martin and myself, if we are sometimes saying, okay, please keep it a bit shorter now. I have good news. Actually, Steve has joined us now, and we will proceed with the other guests giving their opinions, and then we will have Steve at the end. I will introduce him then and give him also a few minutes to speak about what he has heard so far and to comment on that as well. So Steve, welcome. And I'm handing over to David right now to give a statement of 5 to 10 minutes, if I may ask.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a fascinating discussion already. I will share slides. I do believe in looking people in the eye, but I also believe it's worth taking the time to establish some shared concepts, some shared terminology. So I'm going to offer in the next few minutes 6 theses. Thesis number 1, we're living in a very dangerous time. How dangerous? Existential danger. This is my version of Gitta's slide of wicked problems, so I'm a bit more selective. I think there's real chance of very nasty wars pretty soon. We've had pandemics. There could be much worse pandemics due to bioengineering. We live with the risks of cyber hacking, destroying our infrastructure. We run the risks of accelerated global warming, changing things not linearly, but exponentially. And we live in a time with politicians and other national leaders speaking very often highly irrationally. We live in a time when much of the public discussion is increasingly irrational too, driven by people's despair. We have a great inequality, great perceived inequality. People find themselves on the losing edge of corruption. They see real conspiracies and they jump to other wilder conspiracy theories. Where is the solution? My second thesis is we cannot go backwards. Some people have a fond imagination that there was a kind of past golden age when the population was smaller, the life was simpler and somehow purer. I don't think we can go back. I am not a protectionist. Instead, I am a progressive. This is the first description I'll use to explain things. I believe that the solutions that humanity and society is facing, very real solutions, can only be solved by moving forwards, embracing positive change. And the reason why we can't go backwards, the reason why things can never be the same, is because of technology, which has changed the world remarkably in the last few hundred years, changed the world even more remarkably in the last 10 and 20 years, but this change is accelerating. And many people underestimate the extent of the disruption and turbulence this is going to cause. We have more people on the planet than ever before. These are not just more mouths to feed and more producers of waste. They are also people who are highly educated as never before, who are aware of what technology can do and how it can be magnified and reconfigured. These people are networked together as never before, like we are on this conference network, but ideas can bounce around the world more quickly than ever before. So more people are creating more tools, more databases, more wikis, generating more technology. That's why we have in the world today more people who are knowledgeable and practicing scientists, including citizen scientists, engineers, people knowledgeable about turning technological ideas into commercial products, people aware of social design and user design issues, more educators, more artificial intelligence being created, more deep learning being created, which makes this virtual cycle go even faster. Tools create technology, which creates more tools. AI creates AI tools, which creates more AI. But I'm not just talking about more information technology. We are in the next few decades seeing unparalleled progress and disruption from biotech, nanotech, cognotech, that's reprogramming our brains, robotics, and cyborgs. I said this is sort of bound to accelerate. Well, the actual outcome very much depends on what we humans choose to do. I said I'm a progressive. I would put it better as a techno-progressive. I believe we humans, more than ever before, need to become better at selectively applying some brakes, some accelerators, and a lot of steering. But in order to do that, in order to steer, we need to know where we want to go. We humans who are going to determine what happens with this technology need to sort out very rapidly, urgently, the vision and values and capabilities, which will allow us to take proper advantage of these technological innovations. And what is the state of our vision, our values, and our capabilities? Well, I'd like to quote the father of sociobiology, Edward O. Wilson, Professor Emeritus from Harvard, who said a few years ago, a profound description: the real problem of humanity is we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. It's a very dangerous combination, terrifically dangerous, and is now approaching a point of crisis overall. I entirely agree with Sebastián. We should not just be wondering about what's going to happen decades in the future. These changes require our attention now. But we humans who are seeing technology making us stronger, making us more intelligent, giving us more power, well, we all know what power tends to do. Power tends to corrupt. Absolute power leads to the possibilities of absolute corruption. If we are not careful, if we are still acting on our Paleolithic emotions guided by our medieval institutions and our outdated philosophies, one of these very wicked and very terrible outcomes is possible. But if we can rewrite our vision and our values, I believe, as in the words of one of my recent books, we can obtain a sustainable superabundance in which we take full use of these remarkable improvements in technology to improve our human nature and improve the world in which we find ourselves. If we don't get it right, then as the world is destroyed, as the planet is burning, we will still be bickering and arguing with each other. We need instead to rediscover something more profound. And that takes me to perhaps my most controversial point. Technology can help us to improve our human nature, as well as providing us gadgets for things to go faster. We can absorb what I am calling the transhumanist philosophy, which means that we can transcend the limits, the foibles, the blockages we have inherited from biological evolution and historical culture. We have inherited lots of cognitive biases, defects in our rationality. We are super intelligent, but also super stupid at the same time. But with technology, done right, we can absorb superintelligence with significantly improved rational capabilities. Our problems go a lot deeper, of course, than problems in our rationality. We have deep-rooted issues in our emotional state, which can also, I believe, be enhanced by using traditional disciplines, by taking inspiration from the kinds of Zen stories that Sebastián referred to, but we can use technology to help us get there a lot faster. We have dysfunctionality in our social systems too, power corrupting. The Me Too movement is a testament to these dysfunctionality. With the technology enabling super democracy, we can fix that part of our nature. And last but not least, we have dysfunctions in our physical constitution, which lead us to not only our brains failing, but our bodies failing. That's not necessary either. With rejuvenation biotechnology, we can have significantly improved physical health. So I have emphasized that the flourishing of the future will require changed individual nature. But I didn't deny what I've heard from all the other speakers. There's a complex set of dependencies. We need to address all of these together. If we just focus on any one, we are likely to fail. But in that list of my 6 claims, I don't want us to forget the importance of human nature and the possibility of technology to fix it. And at that, I'll open my eyes again to look at my colleagues, and I look forward to a really human discussion of the possibilities for better humanity, building a much better world ahead.
Very well. Thank you so much, David, for that quite also visibly impressive talk, I would say. And with that, I would like to hand over to Barbara to give us her statement.
Thank you. Gosh, I'm really sort of, a lot of input in a very short time. So that was very condensed. And I would like to say thank you. Thank you for all the research that you've been doing and the frameworks that you give us. And this helps me a lot to do my work, which is slightly different because I'm not so much of a theoretical researcher or theoretical thinker. I'm the one who, how do I say, who should bring all this knowledge into the people that I work with. So when I work with organizations and I work with groups and I work with our facilitator trainings, it's to make people behave that way. And this is quite demanding because when you are within a group of people and you see they all are in their boxes and they don't see a shimmer of hope and you want them to move from A to B because there is a transformational change going on. And then it's the question, how do I lead the people or how do I support the people to open up and follow? And what I've learned over the many years that I'm doing this job is that what you need is you need a lot of appreciation. You need a lot of love for the people. You have to understand very deeply what it means to them to go through this change and to be in that box and help them to very carefully open up so that they develop confidence that it's possible, what we want them to do. And we have a sort of a rule of thumb, what we call is the 4 connects. And this is where I come back to Sebastián because I think it's very, very important. That connection is the key. And with the 4 connects, we mean, first it's important that the persons or the people that I work with are connected to themselves. And this means, that they are connected with their brains and their hearts, and they have this heart coherence state, which is so important because with a heart incoherence, heart incoherence also inhibits brain functions. So it's the first thing is that, how do we get them into a coherent state? And how you do it depends very much on what is the group of people that you have in front of you. With some people you go into meditating together. With some people you need to do it tiny little hints that help them to really think, how am I connected? Where am I right now? What I'm doing here. And this is the first connect them to themselves. The second connect is to connect them with each other. Especially when you are in business context, people come together in a workshop, in a meeting, they're not connected at all. Mm-hmm. So what you really need to do is you have to provide a space where the human side of the people can open up, and you have to give them. Again, it's different. How you do it is different. Different forms are possible, but you have to create a space where this can happen. And people are so happy when they have time to connect in the social field, because it makes them feel safer. And what we need, if we want people to open up, they have to feel safe. They have to have trust in the situation and with each other. And the third connect is connect to the theme or to the topic, because it's so easy to say, are we coming together with this topic here because we are in this transformational change, or today we should discuss our goals or whatever. But they come from all different areas. They come out of their work life. They have problems with their children. So it's so important to really frame, where are we? What are we doing here? Why are we coming together? What's the purpose? What's the goal for the day? What is your expectation? Really to make them connect to the content. And the fourth connect is connect them to their commitment. And this is really just ask people, what are you prepared? What is your part? What are you willing to bring in? And you have to make them say that loud to really get to a commitment, because the thinking about it does not really help. So you make it explicit, not just at the beginning, also at the beginning, at the end. And then when people are being asked and they have to share this aloud, that's a different story. And suddenly they feel seen. They feel my contribution is important and my contribution is wanted. Because very often, when we say we need a more dialogic culture, I very often have people, they say, I need to be told what to do. I want to be told what to do, because I don't know myself how to do it, because I'm not educated that way. So what you want from me, I don't know. How should I know what in this agile world, what's my goal? No, they need a lot of more help because they are not educated, not trained that way. And so you have to really slowly find a way to come onto eye level, and to be really able to be in this together as partners. And it's not just something that you can make like that. It's a story, it's a path, and you have to go this together. And it's a lot of learning also for the leaders, because when you come from a culture where it's quite normal that people do what you tell them, and you have been trained that way for a couple of years, it's not so easy to change that and to go this path together in a co-creative way. Yeah, so I think that's enough for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And I saw how well you were able to connect to all the others in the session. Everyone was listening so intensively, what our YouTube subscribers cannot see right now, but what we see is that everyone was totally aligned with you and in the same mode and vibe. So Thank you for making that happening.
Thank
And with
you.
that, Martin, would you like to introduce Steve to us, who has made his way to the conference?
Yes, great, Steve, to have you here. You had to leave your bed quite early this morning. So great effort, and thank you for joining us. And before you can make your statement, let me have a short introduction of you. Stephen is a Fulbright alumnus, an international visiting professor, award-winning scholar, and director of the Foundation of the Advancement of Social Theory, researching and consulting on knowledge, theory, policy, and strategic planning. An interdisciplinary thinker, his publications cover a range of fields, including psychology, ethics, science, management, organizational learning, entrepreneurship, policy, and program evaluation, with dozens of publications, hundreds of citations, and a growing list of international co-authors. Stephen lives in California, where it's early morning right now, and where the beauty and the wines are balanced by the earthquakes and the wildfires. He enjoys playing chess, fencing EP, and riding his sidecar rig, Igor, or how do you spell it? Igor? What's the way you pronounce it?
It depends on what day of the week it is. Igor on even days, Igor on odd days.
Okay, great.
And depends on which side the deformity is on. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Gitta, and all for inviting me here. My apologies for being late. I would like to blame the commute, but I have no one to blame but myself. But very happy to be here and look forward to this conversation. My work, in a sense, is somewhat like David's, but where he's interested in the acceleration of technology, I'm interested in accelerating social technology, our understanding of how to get things done, to give better tools to consultants like Barbara and others for understanding our world and making things happen. And to do that, I like to look at the history of science, back from the ancient Greeks through the scientific revolution and to the explosion of research in the past few decades. And that exploration in the natural sciences, such as physics and biology, has led to, as David said, a huge increase in our knowledge, our understanding of the world, the development of the miracles of technology in our communication systems. But we have not seen that same advance in understanding with the social sciences. We still face those problems we have since ancient times. We have nuclear weapons now and bioweapons, but still we're thinking in terms of clubs and rocks. So my question is, why is this? Because according to the normal thinking for the social sciences, the researchers are doing everything right. They're following the lead of the natural sciences because they believe that having more data, more information would help them develop better theoretical models. So we'd have better understanding and we could solve the problems of the world. If we could do that, we could have psychology, economics, organization development, sociology, governance, even system sciences that would help us live in the sustainable socio-technical utopia of some sort. But do we have those improved theories and improved practices? I would say not. And that's strange because we have all the data. We have about 1,000 times more data available today than we did only 20 years ago. 1,000 times. It's not all useful. So if we look at academic work, according to Google Scholar, 20 years ago, there were about 400,000 papers mentioning sustainability. 400,000. Today, there are about 4 million papers mentioning sustainability, an increase of 10 times. So, open question. In the past 20 years, do we have 10 times the ability to reach a sustainable solution to all the problems of the world? I don't think we're 10 times as good as we were 20 years ago. Because what's happening is that instead of creating better theories, we're developing more theories. As Julene had mentioned, we have fragmentation. So many theories and perspectives we don't know what to do with it. It's some sort of chaos of post-modernity. What do you do with 4 million theories of sustainability? Where do you even start? Instead of making progress, we are drowning in the water of the well of fragmented knowledge. And this is the problem I faced when conducting my literature review for my doctoral dissertation. I was looking for a theory on complex adaptive systems, and I needed just one theory. That's what my advisor was, just one theory, Steve, just one theory. That's all you need, stop there. And I easily found 20 theories, and all of them were theories of complex adaptive systems, and each one was different. There were no two that were the same. They all had different concepts, different connections within the theory. This led me to start studying, to stop studying human systems as I have done for many years, and start studying conceptual systems, our theories, models, laws, even national constitutions. These are all representations of knowledge, perhaps condensed and crystallized knowledge of how the world works. And in this research, I found myself confirming the results of 2 other streams of research. I found that each theory has a kind of systemic structure because, like all other systems, conceptual systems have parts, and those parts are concepts. And as Julene noted, those parts are connected by causal relationships. But what's critically important is that we have recently developed an approach for measuring that systemic structure in a very rigorous and objective way. And that has let us see the evolution of theories and physics and others from, or physics at least, from ancient times all the way through the scientific revolution. And in ancient times, as you might imagine, those theories were quite linear. They had a low structure. Electrostatic attraction. Who is not a big fan of electrostatic attraction theory? If you rub a piece of amber, and that will make the amber exhale its breath, and that will go around the hair, and that will push the hair towards the amber. One thing leads to another. Very simple, very linear, and of course, not very useful. Unless, of course, you're at a Roman cocktail party and you want to impress somebody with your knowledge of rubbing amber. But amber might slap you, so I would be careful with that. The laws of physics, on the other hand, today are 100% systemic and 100% useful for prediction, for explanation, for design, for building the technological marvels that we have. The theories of the social sciences, they tend to work about 20% of the time. Our national policies only work about, they reach their goals about 20% of the time. Organizational change efforts reach their goals about 20% of the time. And this is really fascinating because as we study more and more social theories, we find they're structured at about the 20% level. So there's something going on here. And if we are able to increase the structure of our theories and accelerate the development of our knowledge, we should be able to fairly easily double the effectiveness of our knowledge. And we've done this in organizational work where the members of the organization take their knowledge, write it onto cards, put it onto tables, integrate it, synthesize it, boom, they're off and running with a successful strategic plan to get some work done instead of writing a strategic plan that's full of buzzwords and sits on the shelf. So instead, the process of normal science seems to have led us to develop these fragmented massive theories that it's actually adding to the confusion rather than the solution. And having millions of theories about sustainability will not help us reach a sustainable future unless those theories have that high level of systemic structure. So my big idea, if you will, is that using structure as a guide, we can accelerate the advance of our social technology with a sort of science accelerator, so that we can perhaps catch up with David's advances in physical technology and understand how we can use those effectively, make those decisions, set those goals. We're not going to reach a socio-scientific utopia today. Looking at the trajectory of the evolution of the social sciences, it's not likely that we're going to get anything useful for another 200 years. And I have trouble getting up in the morning. I don't want to wait 200 years for life to improve on this planet, and we might not have 200 years. So working together, I think we can synthesize, integrate our knowledge, and dramatically accelerate our theories so that they're more useful for solving those wicked problems such as war, injustice, economic collapse, and environmental collapse. Essentially, I think within 10 or 20 years, we could double the quality of our lives. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your thoughts. For everyone watching us right now, we are having a little bit of a spamming problem on our YouTube channel, but we will handle that in the background while we go back to the discussion. For now, our idea is to have a short break to give each of you the opportunity to refresh a little bit, get a comfort break, put on some powder, whatever you need to do. And we would like to see you back here again in 15 minutes, if that's okay for you, which would be for us 2:40 p.m. in Germany, and the others of you would have to calculate that to their own time zones. It's 14 minutes from now.
Okay, no problem.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. This was lovely so far. Thank you. So nice to
Gitta,
have, yeah.
Gitta, I'm intrigued you mentioned you're fasting today. How often do you fast and why do you do it?
1 or 2 times a year when everything goes well, around about 7 to 11 days, but I'm thinking about making a 40 days fasting this year, this fall. And it helps me concentrating. I'm using some superfood powder.
Yes.
Yeah, to get me started with the needed necessary nutrition, but it's better for my brain, especially when doing something so concentrated as we do now.
So it's not a complete fast. You have a small amount of calories of superfood powder.
Around about 200, 300 calories a day. Yeah.
Right.
And you?
5 days a week, I have 600 calories a day. And 2
So
days a
you
week, I eat a lot more. So it's not
Yeah.
the 5-2 diet. It's more like the 2-5 diet.
Yeah.
But it's not so deprived as what you're doing. Although I have talked to people who have done long fasts and felt incredibly invigorated as a result.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking forward to a longer period this year. But intermittent fasting is also helping with longevity and concentration, etc. Yeah. What are your experiences there?
Well, I can point to the research which has been done. The Switch, a book came out at the beginning of this year by James Clement. He has documented a lot of the evidence of the different ways of doing intermittent fasting. There's 3 or 4 different ways, and each person may find one or other to be more suitable to their physiology, their metabolism, their psychology. And it pushes the body into different modes of recovery, so-called ketosis. Now, I'm not measuring myself, so I'm not a scientist in that extent. I'm just going on the spirit that plenty other people have done some measurements, and it certainly improved my health over the last 5 to 6 years in which I've been doing this.
Fantastic. Thanks.
We need the science as well as the sort of theories, the general theories. We need the actual empirical measurements to guide us in these choices. After all,
Yes.
there are many commercial forces and many other ideologues who've got their own reasons for pushing various diets and fast therapies. We need to see through all of that and figure out what actually is going to make us healthier, wiser, and better people.
Yes, and which one is in accordance to the problems of the planet, right? Because some diets, ketosis-inducing diets, are not really the best thing when we think about the animals being eaten there.
Exactly.
So, Steve, did you fell out of your bed this morning?
Yeah, just too much confusion, and I don't know. There was some mental disconnect.
Yeah.
I should have been fasting, but
But your talk was totally connected. So
Yeah.
eventually, but I've done a little bit of low calorie work from time to time, and I have to agree, it definitely sharpens the mind. I don't know, something Paleolithic going on there.
Steve, did you get to hear my talk? I was wondering, did you come in at or before me? Because I was kind of responding to a couple of things I saw you writing in an email. So we should definitely touch base, because I'm working on the paradigm shift in social sciences. So we should definitely touch base.
I came in partway through your presentation, and yeah, I was taking notes like check. Yes, this is good stuff. So, definitely.
Yeah.
On my number 1 on my list of things to do. More connections, better.
I like how balanced this discussion is, with the introduction of Sebastián being more social and relating to the human well-being, and Barbara's ideas on the 4 connects, and then David with the technological, how did you put it, pro-technological, progressive?
Techno-progressive.
Yes, that was it. Yeah, technological, yeah. And then you, Stephen, I really love what you were saying, and I look forward to working with you further. Stephen will join FORMWELT Institute soon, and Julene too. And
Yeah.
Julene, yeah, of course, what you are saying, I love it.
Yeah.
Gitta, you couldn't have made a better introduction after the break. Thank you for coming up.
We are on, yeah?
We are on again, absolutely, from intermittent fasting back to our discussion. And for now, we are actually wanting to invite you all for an open discussion to talk to each other, explore each other's statements, ask questions, and where it fits in, we will also pick up some questions from our YouTube audience to make sure they also get answers to their questions and their comments. And yes, the stage is yours.
Let me continue a little bit as Julene and I were discussing just briefly. We have at least some shared understanding and interest in the evolution of knowledge and development of better theories for better application. And the difficulty of dealing with fragmented knowledge, and that goes back to David and Gitta's conversation around fasting techniques, is there's so many ideas out there, so many alternatives that the average person has no way to look at them all. So they see them all as equal. And so it doesn't seem to really matter, which I think gets us to this post-truth world. But one thing you mentioned, Julene, was leverage points, identifying where in a system we can take the most effective action to get change. And this is one thing where I think Donna Meadows, with deep respect, did not quite get it right. Because her approach to finding a leverage point was to engage in deep study, deep understanding, and then use some intuition to say, here's a place where we can make stuff happen. And one of the stories in one of her books was that you had a group of top managers who had a problem in their organization, and the consultant came in and said, here's your leverage point, here's where to make it. It's like, wait a minute. How the consultant didn't have the deep knowledge, the people who ran it did. So I've developed a more structural approach to looking at leverage points so as to create a slightly more cognitive objective. And it has to do with the intersection of feedback loops. So I think this is visible. So if we have, our representation of knowledge is one feedback loop, and then we have another feedback loop here, then the leverage point is going to be where those two loops intersect. That is the one point of action that's going to affect both of the feedback loops. So I like to think of feedback loops from a structural perspective rather than an intuitive perspective, because as wonderful as intuition is, my intuition says that it doesn't work very well. So Sebastián, are you raising your hand?
I was waiting for the right moment, but please.
This is it.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Now, a question arises to me when I was listening to what you were saying now, and it's about like going to the basis and asking both of you, like, what is knowledge then? Because, for example, in looking that in the contingency, like we've all seen in the news, for example, the Trump family. That is a system, right? A family is a system of people. And we can see that there is some part of the family that has a certain appropriation and understanding around knowledge. And we can see how Mary Trump, for example, has a different understanding and appropriation of knowledge. So that brings me to the question of also the incorporation of the observer and how we appropriate knowledge and how it arises in our daily living as human beings. We can see also in Chicago, as you were saying, Julene, like it is territory, it is a culture, it is the home state of Obama, but at the same time is the state in which people went with machine guns to the city hall when all the pandemic was bursting. So in the end, we can see knowledge in an independent position of the observer, as a truth out there, as information, but also we can see that that information is acquired by people in a different manner. So maybe my question goes into incorporating a little bit maybe of second order cybernetics, maybe putting there how the observer transform also the knowledge that is there, and how our preferences gets in between of what that knowledge is. Yeah.
Gitta, I think this is a very FORMWELT question. I mean, it's directed at me, but I think this is your area.
Yeah. I do not think that people actually acquire knowledge. I would go a little bit deeper and say people are constructing knowledge, emulating the world they are living in, and what there is a lack of fundamental consciousness for how do we create our concepts of the world. That is something people do not learn. That is something, people who studies the humanities learn, who go deep into philosophy learn, but that is not something that is we are teaching to the children and we are teaching to each other. And that is something we thought back then 30 years ago that is something we have to work on. We have to ask the question, how does this actual concept works for you? What are you doing when you say, for example, I am free? What is it exactly? What is going on in your mind? Clarity of concept is something we need. If there's no clarity of concept, we have no clear sciences, we have no systemic social sciences, when people are not actually reflecting on how these concepts are working for them, and how they themselves changed these concepts, why they were working with them, and why they are communicating. So we created FORMWELT in order to help actually with this problem, to bring people together, to go deep into their own construction processes, and then learn how to express them in a universal language. I know it's a complicated term because there actually is no universal language. We know this since Leibniz. But something like that. Let us work with this and for the better understanding of the audience. But that is something we need. We need a global common language. We need a language that is concept orientated and that helps concept oriented, and that helps the individual to emancipate him or herself in his or her own semiosphere. Yeah, when we do not have that, we still have we are going on with this problem that we are communicating with each other without connecting. Yeah, then empathy always runs into symmetrical conflicts, into polarization, etc., and nothing is done. And we can do this for the next 200 years, as Stephen said, and we're getting nowhere, and everything is going down because the crisis we have now are crises that are crisis of consciousness and communication.
Yeah, yeah. I think I just want to emphasize, like Gitta, in line with what Sebastián said earlier, but it's a crisis of consciousness, crisis of humanity, because essentially, you know, in terms of the environmental crisis, the Earth didn't do anything wrong, and the Earth will regenerate itself even if we go extinct. So what we're talking about is a human crisis, systemic, I mentioned in terms of our institutions, but systemic also in the very nature of how we are able, or what disables us from synthesizing our knowledge. Because there's many definitions of consciousness, and I think that's part of the process. You come to your own conclusion about it. But for me, maybe in a broader sense, it's the knowledge that unifies, right? So the, let's say the synthesizing process, and the synthesizing process, linking back into what Steve was saying, for me in advancing social sciences, is understanding this web of relationships when reviewing a certain area. Let's say if you want to review, actually, I would like to review just what Barbara said. Like, let's just use an example that happened today. She was saying, in terms of I'm just writing what Barbara said. Yeah. So in terms of the people she's working with, she says people want to be told what to do, right? They want to be told what to do. They don't know what to do. So let's look at the web that's happening there. Okay. This has to do with cognitive development, right, of a person, which a lot of times the educational systems that we have don't actually support. Depends on where you are. This has to do with socialization, right? It has to do with language. It has to do with what we are developing every day, tying into, what Sebastián said, and understanding, for me also, social conditions and how do we evolve those in this systemic way. Look at the one example that Barbara gave. We have education, we have cognitive development, we have socialization, we have institutions that breed certain types of behavior, right? And then these people are in the middle of this workshop and we want to be told what to do. We have to learn to connect to ourselves, and we have to find that space to feel safe and be together. I'm just giving this as an example where you can see, and I wonder, I'm fascinated by Steve's work. If I were to map out this web of relationships that's around that one issue, Steve, could you find the system leverage points in that kind of interconnected way? Because that's kind of what I'm interested in is, systemic action. I talked about systemic innovation, prototyping new systems, I didn't get to talk about systems acupuncture. Those are forms of systemic action, but giving this example also because Steve said, why can't we solve problems? And I'm very into that too, because I'm a very pragmatic person. Like, we have to fix it. We have to fix the problem, right? But, even in that one example, you see systemic action is going to take a lot more than applied anthropology or applied qualitative method. It's going to take an understanding of that web of relationships and a lot of different types of action that require different resources. So that's part of why social sciences aren't solving, because they're not equipped to with purely qualitative alone. Goes back to the point on synthesizing knowledge. I hope I'm not rambling too much, but I'm trying to bring together the points brought by the speakers to give example about how we can bring things forward with a more synthesized knowledge palette, which then requires us to synthesize our action palette, right? And in arenas where maybe just an NGO works or just a whatever designated organization works, and actually know it's a combination of multiple efforts. And that's what we don't have today. Our systems are polarizing, dualizing. We don't have integral systems. And actually, if we're going to get close to a process that enables that kind of problem solving, so I'm working on transformative ecosystem, we don't have integral systems. The systems that we have are, right wing, left wing, global north, global south, the haves, the have-nots, dualize, even in our language, militarize, dualize. So I think actually one form of systemic action, there's a lot of stuff going on in innovation and stuff, but one form is just finding these, how do we create the inter-illuminating system? How do we create the integral system? How do we combine our efforts in that way? But I'll stop there because I don't want to ramble too much. But I know that FORMWELT has some capability to help synthesize actions as well as knowledge.
Yes, that was one of the ideas, to first think about what can we do. And there's one problem we all know as system thinkers. The moment we start to create something and we follow a vision, we start to forget that there's a world out there doing itself. Yeah, and yes, David.
I think this is a great discussion, and I wish we could understand more about the successes in identifying leverage points that have happened in the past. I often hear that systems theory is about identifying these leverage points, and we need to be able to build on successful examples.
Yes. Yes.
I wonder if people are familiar with Judea Perrell. He's a computer scientist. He's written some very interesting things about the philosophy of science and artificial intelligence. His book a year or so ago called The Book of Why gave a whole lot of different ideas about how to distinguish patterns from causes. You know, there's this bunch of correlations. How can we usefully intervene to make a difference? So I wonder if that has helped the field move forward. And going back further, I remember as a young executive in the software engineering industry, maybe 15, 20 years ago, being very influenced by something called the theory of constraints, developed by Eliyahu Goldratt, who wrote a lot of interesting novels to illustrate his theories. And we were influenced in that in the smartphone industry. We said, there's so many things we could change. Can we find the critical chain part? And we eventually figured out, you know, we are taking too long to develop new smartphones because we don't have a particular thing. It's called a hardware reference design. And we should put more priority in getting this hardware reference design and one or two other things. And if we can do that, then we'll be faster to change the world of smartphones. So I would just I throw out this question to everybody. What are the best insights about finding these points of leverage? What are the best examples? And what do you think are the actual points of leverage that most need to be addressed, so that all these fine ideas we're talking about will actually change the world rather than just continue to be discussed for the next, I think Steve suggested 200 years.
May I start? From my perspective, every initiative that works alone will fail. We need a more general approach that integrates the public. Every time when I listen to someone addressing from bottom up, things are getting political. And when we have a look at the global social platforms, we see that almost all of them who are now in power are constructed in a way that supports symmetrical conflict even further, and that helps with polarization. So they are built to make money, but not to bring people together. They are fragmentizing people even more. And when I listen to Barbara, and I listen to you, David, and you, Steve, and Julene, and you, Sebastián, I see that we have to address several points at once. One point is individual conceptualization. The other is the 4 points of connect Barbara mentioned, which are really difficult to address in a more global space. This is work that is done from in smaller groups. Yes. So what can we do to build trust, to help people to trust in communication platforms, for example? What is there to be done that is important? And how can we address the masses to live up to this idea we have to accelerate thinking and science with a broad political approach on making science ridiculous. Yeah, so yeah.
If I can tie a few of those together, along with the possibly a possible partial answer to the YouTube question about how to excite people, I would argue that a big problem of our arguments is that we are, as humans, we are really good at making distinctions. We'll say, yeah, this is A, this is B, and one side will say this is good, and the other side, this is bad, but our understanding of those is incredibly weak from this perspective.
Yeah.
Until we start to see, well, wait a minute, what if we say there's a causal relationship, and how do we measure each of these? And Gitta, I would argue that the greatest chance we have for a common language that I've found so far is this understanding of measurability and causality. And those are common across every academic discipline that I've looked at. And they also make the knowledge actionable. You could say, for example, cats are related to mice. Meaning what? Are we talking geographically, genetically, who knows what? And especially philosophers could argue this for easily hundreds of years. But if you say the more cats we have, then the fewer mice we'll have, then you have something that has a clear causal relationship and a measurable result. So how to excite people, I think, is to develop these kinds of, or at least develop a shared understanding or shared acceptance of this as kind of a common language. And we've done this with clients where we sit down and create a knowledge map, and everybody adds to the map and everybody votes on the map on a piece-by-piece basis, so that by the time they have a highly complex interconnected knowledge map with lots of leverage points, everybody has bought into it on a piece-by-piece basis. They might be a little confused about the size and the complexity of it, but they've bought into the map, and they can see from the map that there is a path to get to where they want to go. Instead of saying, oh, we need a utopia. Oh, okay, how do we get there? Where are the steps? Yeah, we can't just, say, then a miracle occurs and somehow it's all better at the end.
Yeah, that's why we created language, and we want to build a platform that helps with this kind of stuff to bring people together to do exactly that, and then do it in their own concepts, which can be accessed by everybody else, even by AI in deep. Yeah, that was exactly the idea. Yeah. Sebastián wants to say something.
Oh, yes, connected to what Steve was mentioning and David's question about like an example of a leverage point. For example, connected to nature, the reintroduction of wolves in Yellowstone Park. That is a great example of a leverage point in which the reintroduction of wolf diminished the amounts of bison that were degrading the land. By the land degradation, rivers was losing quality, and that introduction regenerated that park. And yes, I can see how there is a causality in the connection of saying too many bisons, let's reintroduce wolf to bring back that harmony. But I fear that also the danger that we may face in certain situations, it would be also the reductionism that it may bring certain people of only seeing that part, the A going to B, and not acknowledging that the whole is greater than just the parts. So my question there, it will be like, how do we hold the awareness and the consciousness of the whole while we are fixing the parts that we need to fix and not lose.
Oh, can I answer that one?
Please, I would love to.
All right, so there's a quote by Augusto Boal, who works on Theater of the Oppressed, that in the everyday, in the micro, there are all the mechanisms of power, oppression, and liberation in the everyday. And there's a field, emerging field called embodied activism that looks at microaggressions, micro-resistance, micro-activism, right? In your everyday interactions, becoming critical or becoming aware of what's happening in the verbal, in the nonverbal, in the space. You know, for space, a very general one is a person with power is the most space and everyone else. How to be aware of all these dynamics in the everyday, taking micro actions, and then developing the systemic thinking to trace those out into the larger order systems. There's an app actually, really wonderful, 1 Million Women Rising for the environment. And they give you these micro actions for plastic, for this and that, and then they have a ripple. So then when you take those actions, it shows you the ripple. It shows you the ripple effect, right? So I think you can act every day, but it's you becoming more critically conscious it's similar to what Gitta's saying, an emancipatory, becoming aware of what you can do in the everyday. And then I think what people struggle with is seeing the ripple. Some people believe it and you feel it, and that's one thing as well. But when you can have an app that shows you the ripple, when you develop the skills to map, to be able to say that behavior, I can map that in the effect of that interaction. Why? For example, in appeasement, and I've dealt with this in different cultural contexts where there was something I didn't agree with, and as the woman that this man took to that show, everyone's supposed to smile. I didn't smile because I didn't think it was very I didn't agree with it. And he's like, stop being so difficult. And I said, how am I difficult when I'm sitting here doing absolutely nothing? I'm just not smiling. You are no longer giving me the symbol, which means like you are conforming to what that's the issue, right? So in the everyday, being able to note, act in the everyday, and then map the ripple, map the intersectionality, become aware of the larger order systems. That's something everybody can do.
Yes, love it. Love both approaches and everything here. Sebastián, Julene, Sebastián, you said you mentioned the problem with reductionist thinking. The fascinating thing here is, I think one of the leverage points is for the average person to learn to think systemically. And the fascinating thing about systemics is it is reductionist theory. Yeah, it helps actually. So we don't have to say the old things are bad, etc. We can use this to build a bridge and help people to understand that the moment they start thinking in relations and start watching out for universal attributes of phenomena, of systems, etc., they start to slow down. Yeah, they can use their reductionist abilities they already have learned to slow down, to step back, and to analyze the whole thing while at the same time reconnecting to it. Yeah, that's another thing we did. We implemented fundamental concepts of systems theory and constructivism into the language so people can learn them playfully without any exhaustion, etc., and can start talking in these concepts. I made workshops with people with absolutely no knowledge about systems theory, cleaning women, for example, yeah, and they start working with this language, and you can see how they blossomed and understood. Wow, this is me. I am doing this. There's no definition outside. I have to learn this big, whole, exhausting concepts. That is something I build in my own mind. And that is actually really, really helping. And that is something we can do on a global scale the moment we initiate a platform, bringing all people together, starting to work with these concepts. I think there really is a leverage point here. And I think that would help with the ideas Barbara had, because this can form an atmosphere of trust and connecting, and will help with your ideas. And what David is talking about, technological progress, to think technological.
Techno-progressive.
Yes, it's a long word. Yeah. Yeah, it helps there too, because then they can see they are not exploited any longer, and they can explore science and technologies, etc., because all of them in the end can be referenced in this language, and they are in full accessible to everybody. That is something what was our idea.
Yes. And also, if I may jump in again, and something that also really connects there, and bringing forth the example that Julene mentioned, is also data sharing. We, as consultants, in my experience, for example, I've seen many times the struggle between sales and manufacturing or operations, because the sales department sales, operations sometimes get overflown. Let us not speak about distribution there. So many times the silos in the company are suffering because of the lack of data sharing. But taking into account what you mentioned, Gitta, when we invite them to see from a distance, and we can create one system of data sharing, that connects to what Barbara was saying also, connecting empathically where others are. to be able to make decisions and jump into agreements and to put boundaries into what we do and we do not do by seeing the whole of the system. So I believe that also data sharing in a manner that is understandable for everyone is critical.
Yeah.
And let me just echo that very briefly. And yeah, when it comes down to it, we have to take simple linear actions. That's just the way the universe works. We could look at a huge complex map of everything that's going on, but we can only do one thing at a time. So I think that skill, that ability for people to grain out, look at the big picture, and then focus in collaboratively. Okay, you're going to do this part over here. I'm going to do this part over here, and everything's going to have some sort of confluence. So, Sebastian, I think that's absolutely spot on.
Bringing human super intelligence together.
We need it.
Yeah.
We need it.
Human intelligence, nah, it's pretty darn limited.
But we have some good moments too.
We do.
Well, science has thrived by people criticizing each other's work, checking that each experiment can be replicated. And when it can't be replicated, then there are question marks. Individual scientists are biased. Individual scientists have got their own prejudices, but the science community as a whole is meant to, and it does when it works well, transcend their biases and check things out. So we are stronger when we can draw on that collective, collaborative intelligence. But we are pretty fragmented in terms of what we're trying to do. I think I want to come back to the question that Evan Parker raised on the YouTube discussion. His view is that the most critical thing is to be able to excite people and politicians so that they actually care about this, rather than thinking, hey, this is a bit interesting, but you know, I've got other things to get on with, you know. Yeah, this systems analysis stuff, well, intellectually interesting, but no, here's a fire I've got to put out in the present day. So what can we do to raise the priority? And I was struck by something Barbara said early on. She said she's not in the business so much of managing change, but of facilitating change. And it reminded me of perhaps the best book I've ever read on change, which is called something slightly different again. It's Leading Change by Harvard professor John Cotter. And he analyzed through many years, why did change initiatives fail? And he came up with, I think, 8 reasons why change initiatives fail. And his number one reason is lack of a sense of urgency. People saying, well, this is quite curious, this is possibly important, but I'll leave it to somebody else because I've got things more important to do. So I agree with Evan that we have to find a narrative that's going to motivate people to want to do things now, not just out of fear. And the second cause of change initiatives failing is lack of a sufficient clear vision of the positive change. It's if you just say, hey, let's do things better, let's be more systematic, people think, well, that's too abstract. It has to be something much more concrete. So I think my own leverage point suggestion is we need to get more people on board with a credible vision of a better future, which goes to what I've called the sustainable superabundance. But others may have different views. So that's my analysis as to why things aren't happening enough. There isn't a sufficient sense of urgency, and there's not a sufficiently credible vision of a positive world. It seems to too many people to be a bit too vague, a bit too theoretical, a bit too disjointed.
David, would you agree that this lack of a sense for urgency has something to do with our education systems? As we, as a society in Germany, for example, have missed the point where we understood that wealth comes with responsibility, and that most people do not learn how to bring themselves into society.
Absolutely. Education is often about teaching people to do things that are already well understood, to be part of a kind of a factory system, automated. And that made sense when life didn't change very much, when skills didn't evolve much. But now we're living in much greater uncertainty. There are powerful emotions around about fear, and we need better skills at doing what we're talking about on this panel, facilitating change, leading change, embracing agility, and as Sebastián said at the beginning, being prepared to accept failure without condemning it. Of course, we have to try and fail in smart ways rather than stupid ways, but to failing forwards rather than failing backwards. If we're involved in a failed project, do we try and hide it from our CV? Do we try and say, nothing to do with me, it was that guy over there, it was their fault? Or do we actually say, well, what have we learned here? And this ability to teach agility, lean, and leading change needs to be part of a revised education syllabus for all of us, of course, not just for those who still happen to be at school. Learning how to learn from failures, learning how to go step by step towards shared vision, I think is the most important skill. And that's what I know Evan, who made that comment, as well as being an emeritus professor of nanotechnology and a very bright guy, he is working on a book on the revolution of education, in which these ideas are much more in the forefront.
Let me jump in just briefly and argue a little bit to one side of that. It's just having some experience with the difficulty of creating a shared vision, especially in the United States, where, let's see, 330 million people, we have at least 600 million different visions of the future. I would suggest perhaps interdependent visions of the future.
Yeah.
Just using a simpler example, if you go for an organizational change effort at a corporation, I guarantee that the janitor is going to have a very different vision of the future than the CEO. And the actions that they take will not be the same. But with a good knowledge map, they can see how each reinforces the other. So that's just one small adjustment to that I would suggest.
And something, I don't know who mentioned this. I think it was you, Steve. No, it was David, that one of the greater things about science is that scientists contradict each other in the following, the community create something worthwhile. In transdisciplinary science, more and more scientists I listen to talk about not relenting. Yeah, is this the right concept? Yes. Not to relent so much on contradiction, but more on a more creative conflict that starts integrating what the other has said instead of first looking for what is there to contradict, especially in humanities, where, at least in my experience, sole contradiction leads to rigid academic structures.
On this, I really want to give a thumbs up to Jonathan Haidt, the American psychologist, whose book on the righteous mind, why good people differ on religion and politics, why people have different intuitions and why they so often fail to come together. But he offers very practical suggestions for transcending this partisanship. So I would add that set of insights to the core syllabus for better education for the 2020s and beyond. I think there are things that can be done. He and his colleagues in his initiatives have demonstrated that occasionally, although it's very hard in a time of increasing tribalism and social media making things worse rather than making it better, but there are some positive examples there too. So I don't think we're doomed to have 330 million different visions. I think there is work that can be done to help people find interdependency on their visions.
That's beautifully said. And I was wondering, since many of you could relate so well to Barbara's comment in the beginning, if maybe Barbara, you would like to share also your thoughts on what is happening here right now.
No, just at the moment, I'm very fine just listening, because there are so many wonderful ideas that no, nothing to add to that at the moment. Thank you for.
May I have a question for Barbara? I'm sorry, Sebastián. Do you want to go first?
No, it's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for you. The ideas you have and the work you do, what is your idea on making this a more broader aspect, a more broader vision for society. Have you thought about that?
What is, what drives me in the work that we do, it doesn't matter where I start, it's always about helping people to become more aware and helping them also to be able to self-regulate. So to be more conscious. And this is also the work as a facilitator, the work that we do is, well, we do a lot of mirroring. So trying to mirror back to people, to help them see the patterns of behavioral, where they always fall back into traps that are not necessary. And it's really not, it's not consultancy work in that sense. It's really about enhancing awareness so that the systems we work with can really find their own path while they are going, and also to help them, going step by step. And it's really about, the path develops while you're walking it, and building the trust that, you just have to try and be careful how you do it, and be conscious about how you do it, and then progress in walking further, because like you said, nobody at the moment really knows the correct way, because we are stepping on new territory. And so when you step on new territory, you have to be conscious and careful and courageous at the same time. So it's really, I mean, it's one of the greatest times we live in, because it's really sort of the beginning of something that can be very successful or can fail. So it's open.
Yes. And thank you, Barbara, for bringing that up, because it connects me to a post that I did yesterday on Instagram by Krishnamurti, a small quote that says, "Please think this out with me. Don't wait for me to tell you. You have to exercise your own mind to find out. My words are merely a mirror in which to observe yourself." Because I think that what you were mentioning and what Krishnamurti says there, it also brings us to the fact that human beings, we are bad at listening, at profoundly listening. And when we are talking about science, for example, discussions, we are entering many more dialogues rather than conversations. By understanding dialogues from the Greek root through reason, when we have a dialogue, are two reasons that are colliding one to the other. But when we enter a conversation by its Latin root, conversare, which means to dance together, to move together in turning, in creating something different. It's like tango, like we create something different when we are together there. But when we are in logos, we are in conflict. So of course there will be like contradiction in science, especially if there is some science that is being lobbied and paid by companies, or if it comes from ideological standpoints that are not willing to let go of certain assumptions. So how do we open and connect it to Otto Scharmer? Open mind, open heart, open will, in order to let appear what is actually there, instead of just trying to validate what we already know and what we already think.
What you said about dancing, I love that very much, because we are analyzing, we are emulating, artificially emulating forms of cognition and communication, and as a self-referential and autopoietic system. There you can see how these systems self-rhythmatize. They are actually dancing. Yeah, structural coupling is nothing else but rhythmization, and I love that note of yours, because that actually is life. Yeah, dancing.
I just want to bring the arts into it a little bit, because that is also my background. And one of the things that I'm writing about now is qualitative progress. Right? How do you use artistic language as an integral for integral human faculties, making qualitative progress. In living systems, qualitative progress is the death of forms. This is the butterfly, caterpillar. When you have so much qualitative progress, it changes form. And this is the principle actually that I'm interested in, because we don't have very much qualitative. It's mainly quantitative, analytical, measuring, dissecting, this and that. And things like the arts and social sciences are not as propagated, or I'm trying to find the right word. Anyways, I just want to go back to the point. How do we do that? So far, in terms of what I'm looking at, involving arts in various forms of inner transformations that enable different forms of collective capacities, right? So there's examples of guided imagery in music, groups that had a lot of historical baggage, conflict history in the middle of traumatic events, using the guided imagery and music method. And what came out of that was a work called Collective Vulnerabilities, and the violence and things significantly dropped. We have all of these methods. That's just one. Neurologic music therapy, trauma-informed art. We have tons of these. We're not using them because we don't have an emphasis on qualitative progress. I think that's going back to what Sebastián said about the human crisis. And what I'm looking at with musical nutrition is that can we, like the food industry, began to label what's inside food, right? And then after that, we create diets to solve all these different problems, superfood problems. Can we do that with music and sound, which I've done a lot of sound science. So yes, I can do that with music and sound. But the point is, can we redirect our attention into the qualitative and start to understand its capabilities? Because I see, new forms of social learning, new forms of self-development, because essentially, we can create superhuman futuristic systems, but if we are still in the same mechanisms of thinking, if we still haven't grown and evolved ourselves, and I think it was David that had a slide on this, that the lacking of the wisdom, but accelerating technology, that this is actually a really key part of it. But to notice that we do have these skills. There is, I could probably talk for 1 hour straight on arts-based methods in health, in education, for social change, and catalyzing social processes. It's a huge area. But I think the point is, we have these tools, we have the knowledge database. I think we're just lacking the values. We have a lot of materialistic, consumeristic values, and to solve this, we can go back to ourselves and we can open up all those toolkits. And I'm very interested in the prospect of qualitative progress, that if we really have inner transformations for new capacities, new forms of social learning, development of critical thinking, emphasis on cognitive development, qualitative sensory processing, somatization of trauma, all of these qualitative, just imagine, we won't even be able to think of the genius that will come out of that. It is the death of forms, the death of these structures that are holding us back from that perspective. I just wanted to throw in the arts into this. Since you started talking about dancing, I said, everything is dancing, but we're not moving, we're not rhythmatizing. So we have the tools, we just maybe need to change our emphasis and get some good social innovation tech into there. And yeah.
I totally agree with you. And I think what people need is the space to really open up to this. And I think in the work, because we are influenced by Otto Schama, we have worked a lot on listening, because listening to me is really the beginning. And if you know the work by Nancy Klein, she wrote a book, Time to Think. And it's really my ability to listening to you that really opens up your thinking capacity. And this is something that really, really struck me. And it's amazing, when you start exercising with people on this topic on listening, and they suddenly feel, what it that it opens up a space inside of them, you know, of being suddenly becoming a more creative thinker. And, you know, one thought comes to the other because somebody else is holding the space for them. And it's just listening and allowing, you know, me to open up in my thinking and expressing myself. And it's so beautiful to see people grow when you open up that, when you give that space.
Thank you, Barbara. Right. When you do concept work, what is happening there is that you first start to listen to yourself, and while doing that, the density of meaning is rising while talking, and that helps again with slowing down. And the more people learn actually to read, people do not learn to read. Yeah, they learn to they learn sign language, but really listen and looking at every single word and how the words are combined and related to each other. That is something people do not learn. Only philosophers. Yeah, they learn this kind of listening, reading, thinking, speaking, etc. That's a problem. The other one, back to rhythmization, we do dance. We dance on Facebook, we dance on Twitter, but it's like we only know polka and nothing more. Yeah,
that's the problem.
There's
It ties
a book
into the. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, just briefly connecting a few thoughts here, and a question that popped up on YouTube, talking about what's missing, what we don't understand. And I like to use the structural perspective, and there's two things we know here. One is that we understand that everything needs to be in a loop. The other is that one loop by itself, only a pretense of knowledge. So we need to have at least two causal arrows pointing at each concept. Then we have a much deeper and much more actionable understanding. So looking at this map, we don't even have to know what these things are or how they're measured. We can just look at the structure and say, there's something missing here. There's only one arrow pointing at this. So there's something that needs to go there. There's only one arrow here. So there's something that needs to go there. There might be a connection here. So in that, we can use the structural perspective, and we could think of this as gap analysis, or I like to think of it as having the magical ability to see the invisible. We can see that there is something not there. We might not know what it is, but I think it was Sebastian's point about the degradation of the environment in Yellowstone. They said, wait a minute, there's something missing here. It's the wolves. Once we put the wolves in, then we understand that the system is more complete. But our minds are not well organized like this. Our minds are all fragmented. But when we start to create this map and we see the structure, we can start to connect with other people's minds, other people's thinkings, and start to create something that is more structured, more useful by synthesizing, as Julene said, the knowledge rather than arguing about different points.
Yeah, what comes to mind, what comes to my mind there, the Aborigines in Australia, they work with song lines, and when the Western culture ruptured the song lines, the people started to suffer. Why? Because they lost their narration. They lost their contact to the dream time. They lost the contact to their elderly, etc., and that harmed them very, very deep. A friend of mine always says he is not interested in any science without knowing anything about the scientist. Yeah. So he needs the bio to understand why. Why is he thinking about this? Why is he working on this? What has happened in his mind? We have so much knowledge, but we do not know why the people have actually done this research.
So this reminds me of possibly one of the most viewed ever TED Talks that start with Why by Simon Sinek. My suggestion for what's missing, listening to all the discussion in the last 10 minutes or so, my discussion for what's missing is the right narrative for why. Why should we be doing things in society? As Sebastián said right at the beginning, the problem with much of entrepreneurship and innovation in science, it's being put to one task, which is growing business. You know, we get excited because it boosts business. That's the wrong why. We have cut ourselves off from the true narration. And we were like the Aborigines, we couldn't get back to the original cause. So, Julene was saying earlier, you know, we have these methods which could be used to improve our individual well-being, music therapies, all kinds of dance, but they don't seem to be prioritized. Why? Because, well, they don't contribute to the big why of society. Society does have a why. It's the GDP, it's the gross domestic product. Politicians, leaders of society are all worried now. Oh my goodness, we're in a recession. The GDP is falling. Oh my goodness, we're in a problem. More people are out of work. We should say that's the wrong measure. Who cares if the GDP goes down? We should be measuring instead, are people able to flourish? Are people being creative? And there are some countries who are experimenting with this. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand has done a bit of this. Even in the UK, there is on the government website index of well-being, but it's buried. It's not highlighted. It's vaguely something we're vaguely aware of. So I think my summary of a lot of this discussion is the leverage point would be getting raised much higher on a discussion of the general well-being index, you know, and who cares if the economics appears to be going backwards? That's all right. You know, I don't mind people being out of work so long as they're able to have a good quality of life.
Yeah. One key element is that people have an income without having to work. People need to feel safe. That's what you were talking about, Barbara. But I again interrupted you, Sebastián. I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, it's okay. Please.
I'm ready.
Okay.
One very quick point of agreement with David is that I read absolutely brief but brilliant piece. I forget where it was, but they're basically saying what the economists have been saying for centuries is that, you know, better, faster, cheaper. We need to, you know, have lower prices and more things. And along the way, so many people have been thrown out of work. And what was missing from that picture was that many people have a very a deep sense of meaning associated with their work. People want to be doing something, even if you had everything for free. If you had wealth, abundance for free, maybe some people could live that way. I don't think I could. I would have to get up and do something. And people want to get up and feel that they are making a meaningful contribution to society, not standing on the dole, getting handouts. Even if it goes to a certain hierarchical order, at least people feel some people feel a certain level of comfort in knowing their place in the order. And one of the worst things is to be disconnected from that order. You have you know, areas where there's been economic collapse. You know, the fishermen are happy because they're fishermen. Then the fisheries collapse and they do nothing all day long. And their wives work and, you know, bring in enough food to keep people alive. But the fishermen were despondent. And there's drinking and suicide and murder because they did not know how their efforts, their meaning in life was to be connected with the rest of society. They were simply cut loose.
This is incredibly serious. This has been tracked in the Deaths of Despair, the analysis by Angus Dayton and Anne Case, the husband and wife pair of economists. It's related to propensity to vote for populists and irresponsible politicians. When people feel they're being left behind, they no longer have a meaning, they're attracted to the person who seems to be saying, don't worry, we'll get it back for you. Unless we can solve this problem of lack of meaning, unless we can show people how they can have a flourishing, creative, sustainable live, they are more likely to do bad things. And even if only 1% of 1% of 1% pick up arms and try and fix things by running off and joining IS or Aum Shinrikyo or other groups, it's incredibly dangerous, and it could lead to, as in my slide, the end of the world. What's going to drive people to that? It is the perception of a horrendous inequality of value. As Noah Harari, the historian, has said, we are facing a bifurcation of the human species into the almost gods and the mainly useless. The small number of people who happen to be well rewarded because they contribute to the few companies who do exceptionally well have great abilities. Other people no longer have value, and it's very bad for them psychically. It's bad for society when there is this disparity, and it's also very dangerous because, as I said, a small proportion could inflict their suicidal tendencies on the rest of the planet. So let's fix this urgently with a vision for how everybody can have meaning, even in a world when most people don't need to work.
Yes. I'm totally with you. Thank you. I've done a lot of voluntary work with people here in Germany living from what we call Hartz IV. It's a devastating system, which has the spirit of, as long as you have your feet under my table, you have to do as I tell you to. And that is doing something with our whole society. It's conditioning us, and it's a conditioning. Yeah, it's a conditioning that makes people feeling like slaves. And when people cannot become adults and are not treated any longer as adults, they start to act out. Yeah, I really can relate to this, and I understand it very, very much. It's not only the lack of money; it's a fundamental lack of respect.
And this is what I was talking about with systemic incentives, understanding how institutions have a causal relationship to human behavior, right? The incentives of the economic system, the incentives of your social institutions. And if we do want, if we want to make structural systemic change, acting on the nature of our institutions, prototyping new systems, acting on system leverage points, the system change process. I don't have time to give, I can send maybe afterwards the examples. Systems acupuncture is another amazing one. I'll send the examples afterwards. I can't do justice to them now. But this is understanding how you can create different social environments by changing the institutional interface, right? So this is also a really key thing, that our economic psychology is creating a social psychology which is essentially completely opposed to everything we need for sustainability, right? You know, and I'm experimenting with this in the music industry, changing the incentives, right? So the music industry just sees music as a product sold and bought. The purpose of creating musical nutrition is to change the incentives so that everything is, so we have human capital, social capital, natural capital, all these different set of KPIs, different set of performance indicators. We can't do anything except support your well-being. If you're sick, we make you better. If you're fine, we raise your human potential. There's nothing else we can do in the system that we've created. And the purpose of that is to design a model that has a different set of incentives. Imagine if institutions were designed in a different way, just to create an alternative, creating alternative systems, prototyping new systems. But I think we don't recognize the extent to which institutions have a causal relationship to human behavior, and therefore a causal relationship to the planetary and environmental crisis. And we institutionalize what we understand. So we have to change our understanding and redesign accordingly.
Okay, that's the first time we have 10 seconds silence.
I just really... let it rip. That's my keynote.
No, it was very, very interesting and very energizing, your talk. And the time is running. We just have 15 minutes left for this conference, part of the conference. And I would like to put a final question, or ask for a final statement on one point, which I took right from the beginning from Sebastián's keynote, where he claimed that we are talking about the future, but we live in the present, and so we have to take action in the present. If we just talk about things which happen in the future and which are not very good for the future, we have to take action now. So maybe one statement from each of you about a first step.
If I may.
Yes, sure, you may.
Thank you. Yes, well, as I mentioned you before, like this past year for me has been kind of crazy in being a digital nomad for the last year, living in Italy, France, and Spain, and on a backpack and a suitcase, and that's it. That's my whole life for the past year. And I wanted to share there like some of the learnings that I've got from that process, especially after participating in COP. The first one, it has been to recognize the boundary between the cultural expectations about me and my own desires. Where is the boundary that I find there? I've been coming from the world of entrepreneurship, where we always see Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg as the lighthouses that we need to follow, and the culture that says you need to be successful and all that. But I wouldn't like, now when I reflect, I see that manner of living, that manner of accumulation, those systemic consequences for the whole world is not something that I want to pursue. So it's pondering in ourselves, what do I want to conserve? What is it that I desire? And what is it that the culture is expecting of me? The second element, it has been for me a little bit of frugality in living. Acknowledging that if I can live out of a backpack and still hold beautiful conversations and sessions and relationship with people, and I can nurture myself intellectually, spiritually, and with food as well, like, why do we need to hold so much stuff? You know, because the more we have, the more we need to work to hold what we have. Yeah. So frugal living, that also connects me to Vandana Shiva's invitation to bring back the commons. I think that there we can also see a leverage point that is important. And the third element, I think, is for us, humanity, to practice, to be aware, and to practice again humbleness. Because we as a species have been, I believe, really arrogant, especially since the Industrial Revolution till now, in which we want everything quick, efficient, fast, no matter what consequence on it. Just a small example, okay, fossil fuels out of the table, we're going to electric, so we need lithium. Are we seeing the consequences that that generates, for example, to the desert in Chile, which is the second world producer of lithium? So why do we need so much? And that humbleness may help us a little bit to acknowledge that we are part of an even more intelligent system than we will ever be, which is Gaia as a whole, which is our planet that has given life to many species and that provides us to the oxygen we need. And the fourth one, I believe, is also compassion. Compassion not in the Catholic way, but maybe in the Buddhist approach, in terms of compassion to others and compassion to ourselves, in order for us to be able to learn from what we do. Because that also connects to something that we do in Chile, and apologize my French. It's an event that is called Fuck Up Nights, in which all different entrepreneurs go there and share how they fucked up in their entrepreneurships and what they learn in a humoristic manner, in an open manner that fosters the capacity to learn and reflect about that. And now I will shut up and thank you for this.
Thank you. I will go next because I have to initialize the next conference. So I will leave a little bit early, 5 minutes or something like that. From my perspective, I think we have to learn to leave and release each other into the undetermined. Not to control each other any longer, and to understand that we all are complex systems and complex people. That's one thing. And the other, to release each other into our natural intelligence and empathy. And that starts, in my opinion, on a global scale with language, because a language is what connects us all and disconnects us all at the same time. So that's it.
If Sebastian's word was Gaia, that we should learn in some sense, nature knows best, I will offer instead the word steering. I think we have to become more active in steering both what nature is doing and also what the economy is doing. I don't agree that nature always will do things that are good for humanity. Some of the things that may happen in nature soon will be very bad for humanity unless we can intervene in various ways. I also don't think that the economy and capitalism is always bad for humanity. What I'd like to put on the table is one more reference. I've been dropping quite a few of these in YouTube. I'm sorry, I mean, it is my nature to try and share learning. I really like the book by Andrew McAfee from MIT. He's an economist. His book is called More from Less. In some ways, the pursuit of capitalism has allowed us to have less of a footprint on the planet and to have more flourishing by many metrics. But McAfee is also clear that we can't just rely on capitalism. We do need to get involved in steering. I think the best invention by some counts, maybe the last 150 years, may be the mixed market economy, which says that sometimes competition can produce lots of very useful innovation, but sometimes it needs to be constrained by democratic actions, by breaking up monopolies, by ensuring that externalities are taken into account. So the mixed market needs to be reasserted rather than the kind of extremes on one side, which is libertarian fantasy that let the market do everything, the central planning fantasy on the other side, that we should plan out everything. We need to get the right balance. We need to get involved in steering. And if we can step up to that, we can steer us through very difficult times. So that is the metaphor I will finish with.
Yeah, I also have a very short one. Thank you, Gitta. It occurs to me that others have probably said this better, but when you have entrepreneurs that are doing fantastically well, everybody looks to them like gods and they say, oh, we have to emulate this. But that very prosperity, that disparity of wealth seems to be an indicator of some kind of systemic failure. And having a better understanding of that would help. Part of it, I think, an idea that I've been noodling around recently is that there is an illusion of wealth in America. Like, oh, we've got these big houses, we have these big cars, and we have all these fancy technological devices, but that's where our money is going. But our money is not going to healthcare, to public transportation, to education. So these things are not sustainable. And to understand that better, to understand these ripples, as someone said, I think the first step is to reach out and connect with other humans and sit down and identify the causal connections between understandings. Because what I found is that process of saying, okay, let's focus on what we think or what we believe is a causal connection and talk about that, that forces people to rethink what they assume, rather than simply saying, oh yeah, there's some connections here. Now, what are those connections and how do we understand them so that we can understand how our actions, our simple linear everyday actions, cause ripples down the line and come back to bite us later on, either this generation or future generations. And I look forward to connecting with anyone and or everyone to make that happen.
Right. Thanks, Steve. I think I'll follow on from that. So I think for me, the actions that you can take, well, first of all, whatever action you take, make sure it's related to you and your purpose. You know, are you someone that acts on the micro level and every day? Are you a meso level person that likes to act through organizations? Are you macro level, you know, when you're working on large scale policies? Where do you fit? So whatever you do, make sure it relates to you. And then I would say always have a personal praxis, learning through reflecting on yourself, critically reflecting on yourself and the world around you, making those critical connections, right? So systems thinking, if you really want to know something, you can learn through doing. There are amazing learning through your own critical reflection. There are amazing case studies of social movements where grassroots activists ended up with the same level of knowledge or higher than the scientists. That happened in the AIDS movement. They were recognized as the new experts because they really wanted to solve the problem. They really, really wanted to solve it. They didn't want the AIDS vaccinations to be so expensive and people in their communities were dying. And they made their knowledge surpass those of the experts. So what I will tell you is that if you do want to know why, you can, right? Just be empowered on that and make sure whatever you do aligns with your role and your area of action. And what I think would really help, obviously systems, acupuncture systems, leverage points, prototyping new systems. This is hardcore system science stuff, and you can go and you can study that. If you're interested, please call me. But what you can do is inter-awareness. Like I said, making the everyday actions, learn to map how those relate to concepts in your society, to institutions in your society. Learn how those narratives work. Build a new narrative. Build a new social space. Architect a new space where different conversations can happen, where different exchanges can happen. So yeah, Qigong. So that's what I would say, because I think we have the knowledge we need to solve this crisis. It's not synthesizing. So whatever we can do to weave connections, weave relationships, create better inter-awareness, I think that's something that everyone can do, and I think that's very much needed. So I hope those couple of points can, can help you on your way. And I think we can solve this global crisis. I don't think it's mission impossible, it's mission difficult. But the point of the inter-awareness is that I don't think any one of us can win. I think we all have to win. I think there needs to be steering. I think there needs to be causal understanding. I think there needs to be changes to institutions. The interesting thing about this crisis is that I don't think any one party can win. We have to give that up. We have to give the me win, I leader thing up, because what will change it is all the key changes in all the different set of interrelated factors. So it's about us now. It's not about I, it's about us. And a pleasure to meet all of us here in this room. It's been a really, really wonderful set of conversations. So thank you.
Also, thank you from my side. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think it's amazing that it's really Corona that helped us to do this, because without Corona, we wouldn't have met here. And I hope we don't need more Coronas to really appreciate what we are doing here and continue doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I wish you a great, great conference, because I will just take the video replays afterwards, but yeah, have a good time. Thank you. It was very nice getting to know you a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, great. Thank you for these famous last words. I don't want to top them because I couldn't. I just want to share some information on the rest of the program of these 2 days or 2.5 days, and maybe there's some one or two topics for some of you or some of the people watching us via YouTube. We have a very interesting weekend ahead, and I invite you to join wherever topic is interesting for you. So, thank you all.
Thank you so much for today.
Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Have a nice
Thank
rest
you.
of the
Thank
day.
you so much.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.